So I decided to take a bit of a different approach for producing a video this time. I know there's a couple people that do watch my videos, maybe a handful, two or three. I want to try narrating the videos and explaining, at certain key points why I do certain things a certain way or what I'm looking for when I make these videos. I make and edit these videos often specifically to look at how my equipment's performing in the conditions that I use it in, and this video is no exception. So I want to narrate this one and kind of walk some of the viewers through what my observations are and what I'm using this stuff for.
Whoa!
So here we see the little guy was pretty excited to see me succeed on the log, and it was definitely my first time trying it. And I'm not going to do it again because I will probably bail the next time. So this particular video clip I wanted to retake since I had my suspension kind of revalved, and this particular frozen frame kind of identifies a location where the entire travel is taken up because of this very hard bump. And in the past valving that had been done on my suspension, the suspension here bottomed out so hard that it actually began to oscillate and kind of lost control of the front. So with the valving that's there now, the entire travel is taken up, but if you notice when the video keeps going here, the suspension recovers very, very nicely and maintains control of the bike. So again, I freeze the frame on a situation where the front has bottomed out here. We're probably about an inch, maybe half an inch from bottoming, or it might have bottomed softly. These clips all show that the front, while it does bottom, is a fairly soft bottom, and on a drop like this, where you're not going too fast in the forward direction, and it's fairly flat. Well, it's perfectly flat, if not angled a little bit up. It's not a bad thing to use up the entire travel. Anyway, on the arms and the body, it doesn't feel like a really hard hit, so I'm okay with the way that this is behaving. There were other clips that I discarded that show, an inch or an inch and a half left in the travel.
Il fait bien, Dad.
Now, I really wish that, zooming in would be easier or faster on occasion because this downhill is very, very rough with big boulders. And, I would like to see the suspension work, but it's definitely not as smooth as it appears in this clip. And it's very easy to lose stability going down a hill like this. So again, a rock bottom situation, but we can see when we rewatch it that it's actually not too hard, and you can feel it in your legs as well that it's not a very hard bottoming. So first question, who in their right mind would want to hit a teeter-totter that if you fall off you can break a leg or an arm or your bike or whatever? Good question, no direct answer. The moral of the story is that it's good for training. Now, notice as this video goes on that once I get to a certain point, I hit the front brakes gently to actually tilt the teeter-totter. If you don't do that, then you'll have a tendency to just basically ramp right off the teeter-totter, or the teeter-totter will fail to teeter, and then you would either get stuck in the middle, kind of in limbo, and fall off to the side, and that's where bad things happen. So personally, I'm pretty impressed with this log matrix and the suspension's ability to conform and keep the wheel stuck to the ground. And in the first part of the log matrix, it's a bunch of old hydro poles that were cut up by Hydro 1 that are laying in the pit. And the second part, the pit is basically empty, and there's a log on the exit. So I think the suspension does really, really well in conforming there, and different suspensions would be much less stable. So this clip here, you can see that I'm starting to pump the bike up to get the suspension to store some energy. And then as I approach the log, I release the energy and kind of jump off the front log to get the front wheel up into the air and get the back wheel off the ground to jump the entire empty log matrix section. And that's one way of tackling this kind of log matrix. So I'm definitely no expert in riding through these log matrices, but one thing I know is when you get the front wheel down like this, and in this case I've ridden through here deliberately like this, once that happens, you have to make sure that your back wheel gets traction and gets enough traction. And so you'll hear my engine rev up here as I try and power out of this and get the front wheel lighter so I can get over top the log that's on the exit. If you don't do that, you stand a chance to ram up against the exit log and bail. So in this clip here, we see that the front wheel has entered the matrix, and the back is about 6 inches from hitting the entrance log. And in a situation like this, which I've done this deliberately, it's very, very important to have some energy stored in the engine so that when the rear wheel does enter the pit, that you quickly release the energy from the rear wheel or from the engine into the rear wheel to get the front to come up straight away. If you don't do that, you stand a chance for the front to kind of hit that exit log, and the back not to get that traction you need to lift the front out and get you out of that pit. So big deal. It's just a dual 2x4 beam, 1 foot off the ground. It really damaged the heck out of my bike when I flipped on it in the first few rides. I think the only takeaway for this, for those that kind of haven't ridden beams or any narrow things like this, is the further ahead you're able to look, the more successful you're going to be. If you look 2 feet ahead of your tire, guaranteed you're falling off. So always look far ahead and keep your eye far ahead, and that's the way to stay straight on these, in my opinion. This damn log. So this is a fairly big log, maybe 16-inch log, and it's lifted maybe 10 inches off the ground. In this case here, in this particular shot, the log had moved ahead due to me hitting it many, many, many times to a location that was more flat than it used to be, because it used to be kind of after a small uphill, and that changes your positioning. So in this particular outing, my success on this log wasn't great. I still got over it without issue, but landed on the front tire way, way, way too often, including one clip in this edit that you can see I almost bailed pretty hard. So on a log like this, in my view, there's many ways to cross it, and I'll pause on another crossing style that I did. But I like to get the front wheel in the air and then kind of jump the back wheel, not over, but I like to drive into the log with your back wheel and do it that way. But not the best video for log jumps. So in my opinion here, a poor landing. The front wheel is going to hit the ground about a foot in height difference before the back wheel. It's going to be tons of compression up front. And although it's successful, we can call it successful. In my opinion, it's a failure. The back wheel should be the one hitting the ground first if one of the wheels does hit the ground first. But ideally, obviously, both hit the ground at the exact same time. So, my opinion. So not a good situation. The front wheel has come down much too hard and much too fast. It's compressed the front, and my lack of bike controls caused the front wheel to turn to the right. So in a situation like this, it'll be a miracle if I can come out of it without bailing towards the right. Here we're going to turn our attention 100% to the small 4-year-old that is really doing a good job at imitating the motorcycle sounds. So I did this for you, Brian, very specifically to show that there are other methods to getting over logs that can still be graceful and don't have to be, very high risk. So in this case here, I've brought the front wheel just to say above the log. There might be a tiny bit of contact, or it's maybe half an inch above. And then I will transfer my weight forward a little bit, or at least anticipate that my weight's going to go forward when the back wheel hits, and then the back wheel will just kind of bop over the log after the skid plate hits, and then you're good to go. You need to do this with enough forward velocity, otherwise you will not bop across the log. If you're going too slow, you're going to come to a halt, and then you're going to fall either left or right. So I will never let a log hop like this be my last log hop of the day, because this is, again, another failure. Just because you get across doesn't mean it's successful, in my opinion. And this is a redo. The front wheel cannot touch the ground first. I'm going to go ahead and be Captain Obvious on this one, in that if you want to succeed in jumping over a log in this way, or in getting the front wheel up when you have very little forward movement to do so, the rear wheel has got to get traction. Now that can mean weighting down the rear very well, either by pulling on the handlebars or on weighting down the foot pegs or whatever. There are many solutions, but it both has to be weighted down very well, and or be on terrain that's going to give your tire the grip it needs to pull the front up. If you don't cover those angles and you just start spinning, that doesn't really benefit anything. So I only show this particular run through the rocks here in a power line because it's a run that I do over and over and over. It starts with rock, has a pretty sharp divot, goes up a rock kind of cliff, so to speak, has a couple of jagged ends, requires you to jump, and then there's a lot of different parts to this run that I do, and they're not illustrated well in this video, but anyway, I think it can be useful to find like a technical run that's fun, and then just keep repeating it, repeating it, repeating it. Brian, again for you, beauty is definitely in the eye of the beholder. My goal with wheelies is to be able to go an infinite distance and balance, but I myself am working on rear brake control. I've always really liked jumping off stuff like this because it forces you to practice taking off, in a short span, making sure you get the traction when you want to get it on takeoff, otherwise you spin and you plant forward. So I like this type of stuff. It's like what I consider low risk, and then you can practice your takeoffs and your landings.
Nice, Dad.
In the front. Yeah. Yeah, whatever. That's fine.
Now, the very discouraging thing about this kind of video is that it never really reflects the feeling of risk when you're watching it as it does when you're riding it. In this particular area, as I ride, along these rocks, as you can see, and then I fly off the side, to me, I get a bit sketched out about it. But on video, it's just some tiny little thing that doesn't look very intimidating. And by the way, this is my 4-year-old boy filming this as well.
Good job. Bravo. T'as tout eu les actions.
So if anybody actually got any value from this edit, it's a fairly long edit. If anybody got any value out of it and actually wants to see some more, would be interested in seeing some more, I'll gladly make it, but I'm very unlikely to make it if I don't hear from anybody that kind of found value in it and wants to see it again, because obviously it takes time. But I think it's always interesting to see how somebody thinks about things and maybe their reasons for making decisions while they're riding, and then you can kind of use those things for yourself.